Well, I suppose one of the unique things is that I have materials in both languages. So part of the focus of the U.S. history class tends to be more on social history as opposed to the political, who's in power, or economic history that one tends to get. It's not so much that to remember who, what, where, when, and why, but how do people look at it and why? How does that affect how we look at things now? We believe in not just transitional bilingual program. We believe in a maintenance heritage language support program in which the students' heritage language is used to acquire the working academic knowledge as they're acquiring the academic English that they need to be successful in English. They were given historical documents. These are document-based questions, so they're given historical documents. And since it's U.S. history, most of the documents that they were given to them in English. I explained, oftentimes we'd go through the document, explain things in Spanish to them. The students are given material in English with some Spanish support. They're given material in Spanish. They're allowed to write in English or Spanish. If we can get them to write well-documented historical papers in Spanish, when they have the English, they're going to be able to write well-documented papers in English. The writing process is going to remain the same. The vocabulary is going to change, but the writing process itself, the idea of what you have to do to set up a paper, what you have to think about, what kind of material you have to support with, all that's going to be there. The history standards are learning about history. That's learning about the different viewpoints, looking at multiple perspectives, which we talked about before from the different books. I mean, why can't you do that in more than one language? The studies that have been done about language, academic language, say, conversational English, 1 to 3 years. But the academic language is much more difficult. We're in school for 12 years, and it takes us that long to acquire it in our own language. To sit there and say, oh, the kids can speak English because you hear them, conversing, and then we're going to just stick them in all English classes with no bilingual support is ridiculous, because those kids may be able to converse fine, but can they do the academic work in a language they're still learning? What we found is that our students that were Spanish dominant oftentimes did wonderful papers in Spanish. And as they did these papers, they themselves found that their English was improving quite quickly, because even though the papers were being done in Spanish, they were working and using material in English, and that they had to think about in a variety of ways. We'd be surprised afterwards when they would give a speech, and they would come out and say things and show that they had grown incredibly in English that we weren't aware of. We know better than that, and many of the people didn't go to school, and many of the people didn't have to. There were all kinds of industrial jobs and things that were available. They just aren't here anymore. You need a much more literate education. Academics are important. They need to know English. They know that more than anybody. The parents know that more than anybody. I mean, one of the main concerns that the parents have, one of the reasons they want their kids in school, is so they learn English well, so they have a better chance of getting better jobs and moving up. No one in our school thinks English is not important. What it's saying, we respect who you are, we respect your language and culture. This is the language and culture of the mainstream America that you need in order to help move forward in academically and probably economically. But we don't want you to forget who you are and what your culture is, because that's just as important. We also want to add on to that. We want to use the resource that you already have, but add to your resource. you really get to know the kids and you get to help them. They feel confident. I mean, I had some of that with some kids, but you get much more because, come on, there's only a couple hundred kids here. How can you not know them? It's the kids that we have here who've been here virtually their whole lives. No fault of their own. They came here with their parents. They didn't have a choice. They are not documented, and they can't go to school. Some of the best students we've had ever, who could contribute so much to our country, are sitting there at the end of their senior year looking at us and say, well, why should I even bother? I can't go to college here, even though I'm one of the top students, because I can't get in because of my documents. And there's no way to even correct that.